Let's set the stage. It's May 1942. The Second World War is raging, and the Pacific Ocean is about to host a completely revolutionary, frankly unprecedented moment in naval warfare. In this explainer, we're diving into a battle that fundamentally rewrote the rules of engagement on the high seas. We're talking about a clash where commanders relied entirely on coordinates, intercepted reports, and radio static, rather than their own two eyes. So how exactly do two massive fleets fight a battle without ever actually seeing each other? Well, the answer lies up in the sky. In this specific engagement, aircraft acted as the distant eyes and fists of the fleet. The ships themselves, they were made miles and miles apart, completely hidden over the horizon. Instead of giant battleships just trading artillery fire, waves of dive bombers and torpedo planes were sent out into the vast open ocean to find and strike the enemy. Section 1. A New Kind of War. The Battle of the Coral Sea, fought from May 4th to May 8th, 1942, holds a very distinct historical record. It was the first naval battle in history fought entirely by aircraft carriers, where the opposing ships never once made visual contact. The fighting was exclusively between aircraft and ships, never ship against ship. It was a completely unprecedented way to wage war, and naval combat was about to fundamentally change forever. Section 2. The Japanese Juggernaut. Now, to really grasp the terrifying global stakes here, we have to look at the unchecked expansion of the Japanese Empire in late 1941 and early 1942. Following the December 1941 attacks on Pearl Harbor, Malaya, and Hong Kong, their advance was just flawless. By February 1942, Singapore was captured. Then, throughout March and April, Japanese forces occupied the Dutch East Indies, including Sumatra, Java, and New Guinea. The Allies were facing a seemingly unstoppable juggernaut, and this relentless push brings us to May 1942 and Operation MO. The primary target of Operation MO was Port Moresby on Papua. Why does this matter? Well, the strategic geography of the Coral Sea meant that if Japanese forces captured Port Moresby, they'd control a highly vital airstrip. From there, Australia would be left fearfully exposed to Japanese air attacks. Plus, a continued push eastward to Fiji and Samoa would completely sever the U.S. Navy supply chain running out of Australia. So, for the Allies, halting this specific invasion was a massive do-or-die moment. Section 3. Decoded. The U.S. Response. The Japanese element of surprise was totally compromised when U.S. intelligence intercepted and decoded Japanese messages as early as April 9th. Fully aware of the enemy's strategy, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz deployed his forces. Now, look at the underdog nature of this matchup. Against Vice Admiral Inua's three carriers, the Shokaku, the Zukaku, and the light carrier Shoho, Nimitz committed just two, the Lexington and the Yorktown, under Rear Admiral Fletcher. Nimitz was taking a massive, calculated risk here, committing exactly half of his available Pacific carrier fleet to this one single operation. Section 4. The Blind Carrier Clash. As forces aligned in early May, the reality of this new kind of warfare proved completely chaotic and messy. Poor weather actively hampered reconnaissance through May 5th, creating a terrifying fog of war and leading to some massive tactical blunders on both sides. Incorrect intelligence led Admiral Fletcher to strike a secondary target instead of the main carrier group. Simultaneously, Japanese forces launched a massive strike against what they firmly believed was a U.S. carrier, only to mistakenly sink a destroyer, the Sims, and a tanker. Both sides were essentially just swinging blindly over the horizon. From there, things escalated incredibly rapidly. Let's walk through it step by step. On May 7th, U.S. aircraft located and sank the Japanese light carrier Shoho in a matter of minutes, which, by the way, was the very first time in the war Japan lost an aircraft carrier. That same day, as we mentioned, the Japanese mistakenly sank the U.S. destroyer Sims. But the true clash arrived on May 8th, when the main battle groups finally spotted one another. An all-out aerial duel commenced, with 122 Allied aircraft clashing head-on with 121 Japanese aircraft. The climax of this aerial assault was absolutely devastating. U.S. fighter bombers managed 3 direct hits on the Japanese carrier Shokaku, damaging it so severely it could no longer launch aircraft and had to withdraw from the fight. But Japanese planes also found the U.S. carriers. The USS Lexington took 2 armor-piercing bombs and 2 torpedo stripes on its port side. The fatal danger, though, according to naval reports, came from sporadic explosions caused by gasoline fuel vapors leaking from a cracked port aviation fuel tank. With multiple internal fires raging totally out of control, the Lexington was doomed. The crew was forced to abandon ship, and it was ultimately scuttled by 5 torpedoes from a U.S. destroyer. The human cost of this engagement was severe. In the sinking of the Lexington alone, 216 members of the crew were lost. It is a stark, heavy number that grounds all these tactical maneuvers and strategic outcomes in the grim reality of naval warfare. Across the entire battle, Allied forces suffered 543 casualties, while the Japanese suffered 1,074. Section 5. Winning by losing. The aftermath of the Coral Sea presents a classic military paradox, essentially a Pyrrhic victory. Tactically, it was a Japanese victory, right? They sank the heavier carrier, the Lexington, along with a destroyer and a tanker, while losing only a light carrier and some support ships. Strategically, however, it was an undeniable Allied victory. Those heavy aircraft losses forced Vice Admiral Inoue to abandon the planned amphibious landing, which successfully halted the invasion of Port Moresby and entirely secured Australia's flank. Losing the Lexington was incredibly painful, but ultimately worth it to halt the Japanese advance. But the true significance of this battle lies in its broader ripple effect on the Pacific War. This was Japan's very first operational failure of the war. But more importantly, the battle neutralized 2 major Japanese carriers. The Shokaku was heavily damaged by bombs, and the Zuikaku, though it hid in a rainstorm and avoided physical ship damage, suffered catastrophic aircraft losses. As a direct result, both of those carriers had to be removed from the upcoming, highly critical Battle of Midway the following month. And that leaves us with a profound historical question, a massive butterfly effect, if you will. If Admiral Nimitz hadn't taken the massive gamble of risking half his Pacific carriers in the Coral Sea, if the Shokaku and Suikaku had been fully operational in June 1942, would the U.S. Navy have survived the Battle of Midway? Midway is widely considered the absolute turning point of the Pacific War, but it was this blind, chaotic, messy duel in the Coral Sea that actually set the stage. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?